The desert wind dragged its claws across the empty plains, carrying dust and silence. A single rider cut through that silence. A broad-shouldered outlaw, his breath reeking of whiskey, his eyes red with hate. Behind him, stumbling and bound, was a young woman no more than 20. Her wrists were tied cruelly, the rope biting skin until blood streaked her hands. A sack smothered her face, the coarse fabric dark with her tears. The outlaw yanked her forward like she was nothing more than a broken horse. His spurs clinked with each step, boots sinking into the dry earth. He stopped at an old fence post, splintered and forgotten, and shoved her against it. "Move, girl." He snarled, spitting brown tobacco into the dirt. She whimpered, muffled under the sack. Her knees buckled, but the rope kept her upright. "Please." "Don't look," she whispered into the darkness of the sack, her voice trembling, not meant for him, meant for anyone who might stumble upon her shame. The outlaw laughed, a sound without soul. "No one's looking. No one cares. You're mine to leave here, mine to waste." His calloused hands pulled the rope tighter, knotting it cruelly around the post. Each tug made her gasp as fibers cut deeper. Her tears soaked the inside of the sack. The sun hung low, bleeding red across the horizon. Shadows stretched long, as if the earth itself tried to swallow her away. Insects buzzed at her feet, the scent of dry sage heavy in the air. He crouched close, his foul breath searing through the sack. "When the coyotes come, remember this. Your mama's gone, and so's anyone who'd save you." She flinched at his words, biting her lip until she tasted blood. Her world narrowed to the sound of his boots as he mounted his horse. The horse pawed at the dust, restless, as though it knew its rider's heart was rotten. He tugged the reins and spat one last time. "You'll be bones by sunrise." And with that, he rode off, disappearing into the bleeding sunset. The girl sagged against the post, chest heaving, sack clinging to her damp face. The desert wind rose again, carrying the echo of her broken whisper. "Please." "Don't look." The desert night did not come gently. It pressed down heavy, with a silence so sharp it rang in her ears. The girl hung tied to the fence post, her head drooping beneath the sack, her breath shallow. Each gasp dragged grit into her lungs. Her lips were cracked, bleeding. Thirst burned like fire in her throat. The ropes cut deeper as she twisted, wrists raw and swelling. She tried to scream, but the sack swallowed the sound, turning her voice into a faint whimper lost to the wind. From somewhere far off, a coyote howled. Another answered. The sound made her heart rattle against her ribs. She pulled weakly at the rope. "Nothing gave, please. Someone—" Her words dissolved inside the sack. The memory of his voice haunted her. The outlaw's sneer, the way he spat, the venom in his laugh. She could still feel his hot breath through the sack when he told her no one cared. She shook her head, but the words clung to her like burrs. Her knees buckled, dragging her weight against the bindings. The wood of the post dug into her back. The desert heat lingered even in the fading light, and sweat stung the cuts on her skin. Her chest heaved. Each breath was harder than the last. Dark shapes shifted at the edge of the horizon. For a moment she thought it was riders, salvation. But the forms moved low, shadows crawling on 4 legs. Coyotes. Their eyes glimmered faintly in the last light. "No. No, please," she whispered, voice breaking. She tried to kick, but her strength failed. The sack grew hot and suffocating, trapping her in her own fear. She shook her head violently, desperate for air, for light, for anything but the suffocating dark. The wind picked up, rattling the dry grass. Carrying the scent of death, a carcass nearby, picked clean. She knew it could be her by morning, her vision blurred. Colors bled together behind the sack. She slumped again, each heartbeat slower, weaker. The world swam, tilting into black. Her final whisper slipped out, barely more than breath. "Don't let them. Find me." And then the night closed in, swallowing her in silence. The horse came first. A soft snort in the distance, hooves striking dry ground. The young woman stirred, head lolling beneath the sack. For a moment she thought it was a dream, another cruel trick of the desert. But the sound grew closer. A lone rider, silhouetted against the bruised sky, made his way down the trail. His horse tossed its head, uneasy, as if it smelled fear in the wind. The rancher slowed his mount, boots creaking in the stirrups. His eyes, sharp from years of watching open land, caught something unnatural near the old fence post. He frowned. He dismounted, boots sinking into the dust. The silence was broken only by the faint rattle of the girl's breathing. He stepped closer. A figure, small, tied, slumped against wood. His hand tightened on the reins. "Lord above," he muttered. The girl whimpered, body trembling. She tried to push herself away, but the ropes held her fast. Through the sack came a broken whisper. "Please." "Don't look." The rancher froze, heart pounding. He reached out, fingers brushing the rough burlap. Slowly, carefully, he pulled the sack away. His blood ran cold. A young woman's face stared back at him, bruised, swollen, streaked with dust and tears. Her lips were cracked, her eyes barely open but alive. "Easy now," he said softly, voice steady as the ground beneath him. "You're safe." "I got you." She flinched, shrinking from his touch, but the desperation in her eyes betrayed her fear. He pulled his knife, not for harm, but to cut the knots binding her wrists. The rope snapped, leaving angry red welts behind. Her arms dropped weakly to her sides. She sagged forward, and he caught her, holding her against his chest. The smell of sweat and dust clung to her, fragile as dry grass in his arms. "Water," she croaked. He guided a canteen to her lips. She drank greedily, choking, coughing, then drinking again. The rancher studied her face in the fading light, anger coiling in his gut. Someone had left her here to die. He lifted her gently, setting her across his saddle. "You're coming with me," he whispered. "Ain't no one leaving you out here." The horse shifted beneath the weight, but the rancher steadied it. With one last look at the empty horizon, he mounted. Together, they rode into the night. The rancher's cabin stood alone on the edge of the prairie, a lantern glowing faint through the single window. The night air was cool, but inside, the fire crackled low, throwing shadows across rough-hewn walls. He carried her through the door, boots thudding softly on the wooden floor. She stirred, groaning faintly, her head resting against his shoulder. When he laid her down on a narrow cot, she flinched, pulling away as if expecting another blow. "Easy," he murmured, crouching beside her. "Ain't no one here but me?" Her eyes darted about the room, wide and mistrusting. The flicker of the fire seemed to frighten her. Every creak of the boards made her shoulders tense. He fetched a rag and dipped it into a basin of water. With slow, careful strokes, he cleaned the dirt from her face. She winced, pulling back. "Don't touch me," she whispered, voice hoarse. He paused, meeting her gaze. His voice stayed steady. "I ain't here to hurt you. Someone's got to see to these wounds." She studied him, searching for deceit. For once she found none. Her breathing steadied, and she let him dab the blood from her cheek. He uncorked a bottle of whiskey, pouring it over a strip of cloth. "This'll sting," she nodded faintly, bracing. When the cloth pressed against her wrists, she gasped in pain, tears springing to her eyes. He worked quickly, his hands rough from ranch work but gentle now. "Why'd he do it?" he asked quietly. Her lips trembled. She turned her face away. He's my stepfather." The rancher's jaw clenched, firelight glinting off the steel in his eyes. He said nothing, but his silence was heavy with anger. She looked at him again, seeing it, not cruelty, but outrage on her behalf. For the first time, she didn't feel alone. The flames popped in the hearth. Outside, crickets sang, and the prairie wind brushed against the cabin walls. He set the whiskey bottle aside and pulled a blanket over her. "Rest now. You're safe here." Her body eased, exhaustion dragging her under. As her eyes closed, she whispered one final thought. "Don't leave me." He sat back in the chair by the fire, rifle across his lap. His answer was quiet but firm. "I won't." The moon hung high, silver light spilling across the rancher's land. The cabin sat quiet, its lantern burning low, the young woman asleep beneath the blanket. The rancher stood at the doorway, rifle in hand, watching the empty prairie. Something in his gut told him the night wasn't empty. Then came the sound, hooves pounding the hard earth. A lone rider weaving in the saddle, reeking of whiskey and hate. The outlaw stepfather. His shadow stretched long across the dirt as he reined in at the cabin yard. He spat into the dust, voice slurred but venom sharp. "Rancher! I know she's in there. Open this door." Inside, the girl stirred, eyes snapping open. Fear washed over her face. She clutched the blanket, whispering, "No, not him." "Not again." The rancher rested a steady hand on the doorframe. His voice was calm, iron beneath the words. "She ain't yours to claim." The outlaw's laugh cut through the night, ugly and raw. "She's mine. Always will be. Don't think you can take what's mine." The rancher stepped out, rifle cradled across his chest. Moonlight painted the lines of his weathered face, his eyes cold. "Not tonight. Not ever again." The outlaw dismounted, staggering closer. His boots dragged through the dirt, spurs jingling with menace. His hand hovered near the revolver at his hip. "You gonna stand between me and my blood?" "She ain't your blood," the rancher growled. "Just your prey." "She ain't your blood," the rancher growled. "Just your prey." For a heartbeat, the prairie held its breath. The girl pressed against the window, trembling, watching. The outlaw's hand twitched toward his gun, but he saw the rifle steady in the rancher's arms. He knew the old man wouldn't miss. He sneered, backing away slowly. "This ain't over. You hear me? I'll be back, and when I come, I'll bring hell with me." He swung onto his horse, jerking the reins hard. The animal whinnied, hooves striking sparks as they vanished into the night. Silence returned, broken only by the girl's sobs inside. The rancher lowered his rifle, eyes fixed on the darkness where the outlaw had disappeared. His voice was a promise, low and certain. "Let him come. He won't take her." The next morning, the prairie was quiet, painted in soft gold as the sun crept over the horizon. The air smelled of dust and sage, the kind of quiet that whispered both promise and danger. The rancher rode into town, the young woman seated behind him, clutching the edge of his coat. Her eyes were still swollen from bruises, but the fire in them flickered faintly, fragile but alive. The streets were emptying, shop doors creaking open, horses tied to posts outside the saloons. The townsfolk cast curious glances at the pair, whispers trailing in their wake. The rancher guided her toward the sheriff's office, boots stirring dust with each step. Inside, the sheriff looked up from his desk, a broad man with a weathered face and eyes that had seen too many tragedies. He listened silently as the rancher set the story in motion. The stepfather, the desert, the rope, the sack. The girl's voice trembled when it was her turn. He left me to die. He's my stepfather. Please, do something." The sheriff's jaw tightened. He reached for his hat, standing with the weight of authority. "You did the right thing coming here. You'll have justice now." The rancher stayed close, hand brushing against hers in quiet reassurance. She glanced at him, heart hammering, gratitude and fear warring in her eyes. Outside, the wind carried the cries of a distant hawk, circling over the prairie like a sentinel. Inside, the sheriff's office smelled of leather and old ink, the smell grounding her to reality. The sheriff nodded at the rancher. "We'll ride out, serve papers, make sure that man can't touch you again." Her hands curled in her lap, knuckles white. Do you think he'll come back?" "Let him try," the rancher said quietly. "We're not letting him." The sheriff's voice cut through, steady and certain. "The law's behind you now, miss. He'll answer for what he's done." For the first time in days, she allowed herself to breathe fully, letting the tension drain from her shoulders. The shadow of the desert, the suffocating sack, and the fear of death seemed to lift, replaced by a cautious hope. The rancher stepped to the window, watching the town wake, and whispered, more to himself than anyone else, "We'll make sure he doesn't get the chance again." The girl rested her head against the rancher's shoulder, feeling safe in a way she hadn't since the desert. Justice was coming, slow but certain, and for the first time, the horizon seemed wide, golden, and full of possibility. Night fell. Like a shroud over the ranch, the sky a deep indigo streaked with pale stars. The girl lay in the cabin, blanket pulled tight around her, listening to the wind rattle the wooden walls. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote howled, its cry slicing through the stillness. She clutched the rancher's old revolver, hands shaking, heart hammering. Outside, torches flickered in the darkness. The outlaw had returned, and this time he brought men. A gang, horses pawing the earth, shadows leaping across the prairie. They circled the cabin, their voices low and dangerous, the kind of menace that made the dry air taste of fear. The rancher stepped onto the porch, rifle in hand, eyes scanning the moonlit horizon. His jaw was tight, body coiled like a spring. "Stay inside," he whispered. "Don't come near the windows." The gang's leader, the outlaw himself, spat into the dirt. "Open the door, or we'll burn this place down," he sneered. The girl's breath hitched. Flames from their torches painted the cabin walls in flickering orange. She could feel the heat even from inside. The horses stamped and whinnied, adding a chorus of chaos to the night. Gunfire shattered the tense quiet. The rancher fired into the darkness, each shot precise, stopping men in their tracks. The gang hesitated, but the outlaw laughed, sloshing whiskey from a flask, his voice raw and cruel. "You think a few bullets'll—" "Scare me! She's mine!" The girl ducked low, heart pounding. Her hands trembled on the revolver, but she remembered his cruelty. The rope, the sack, the desert. A surge of anger replaced fear. She gritted her teeth, squeezing the trigger, aiming at the nearest shadow. The shot rang sharp in the night, a spark of defiance. The rancher lunged through the cabin door, firing again, driving the gang back. Torches fell into the dry grass, igniting small flames that danced in the wind. Horses reared, hooves striking dirt, dust and fire swirling into a chaotic storm. Through it all, the rancher's calm determination held. Every shot, every movement, a promise. She would not be taken again. The girl's courage began to rise within her, a fragile flame matching the hearth she had hidden behind for so long. By dawn, the dust and smoke settled. The gang had fled, leaving scorched grass and the echo of their threat lingering in the morning air. The rancher looked at the girl, breathing hard, sweat and soot streaking his face. "You all right?" he asked quietly. She nodded, voice hoarse but strong. "Yeah, we're all right." The storm had settled into a low moan, sweeping grit across the empty ranch yard. The rancher stood by the barn doors, sack clutched tight, his knuckles white. His heart thudded like hooves in his chest. He whispered to himself, "God help me. What am I holding?" The barn lantern swayed, casting crooked shadows. He set the sack on a hay bale, staring at it like it might spring alive. Then slowly, he unknotted the rope. Inside, bundled tight in burlap, was a bundle of rags. But hidden in the folds, a diary, worn leather, the edges stained dark with something that wasn't dirt. He flipped it open. The first page read in a woman's hand, "If anyone finds this, know that he made me carry the secret. He said the land would burn if it came to light." The rancher's jaw clenched. Each page revealed sketches of symbols, drawn over and over. Circles, crosses, markings he had only seen carved into fence posts at the far edge of his land. His pulse quickened. From the shadows, the girl's voice whispered again, though her lips did not move. He buried them beneath the cottonwoods. "Don't dig, or you'll see what he made me hide." The rancher staggered back. The diary slipped from his hands, pages flapping like wings. Suddenly, a heavy thud echoed outside. Hoofbeats. Someone, or something, was riding in the storm. The rancher snatched his rifle, eyes darting. "Who's there?" he barked into the dust. The reply came not in words, but in a low, guttural laugh that rolled across the wind. A man's laugh, one he recognized from long ago, the voice of her stepfather. The girl's eyes filled with tears, her lips trembling. She finally whispered aloud, "Please, don't let him take me back." The rancher tightened his grip on the rifle, torn between the living threat outside and the haunted truth within the diary. And then, silence. The hoofbeats stopped. The wind died. The barn doors creaked open on their own, inch by inch, as if inviting something in.